Chapter 5. The most striking of the Tibetan Buddhist doctrines, that which is especially noteworthy in the secret teachings, concern the, quote, going beyond. This doctrine is based on the Prajna Paramita to which the great work Nagarjuna is consecrated. The Tibetans, like the Chinese, have given to the term Prajna Paramita a very different meaning from that which is attributed to it by the Indian authors, and which was adopted from them by most Western Orientalists. According to the latter, Prajna Paramita means excellent wisdom, the best, the highest wisdom, whereas for the Chinese, it is a question of a wisdom which is, quote, gone beyond. According to the Prajna Paramita mantram, which is recited in all countries professing Mahayana Buddhism, quote, O wisdom which has gone beyond the beyond, to thee homage. However, while this mantra shows us a wisdom, quote, which has gone beyond, gone to the other shore, as the Chinese say, Tibetans translate Prajna Paramita by this other expression, that is to say, going beyond wisdom. The genitive particle kya leaves no doubt as to the meaning intended by the translator. To express that wisdom accomplishes the act of going, he ought to have written something different. But more than any grammatical consideration, the fact that a whole doctrine is based on the precept of going beyond shows us the spirit in which the Tibetans understand the Prajna Paramita. It has seemed to me necessary to give my readers these explanations because those among them who are familiar with Buddhist literature may be surprised at the manner in which these, quote, excellent virtues which they have met in the course of their reading are considered here. The number of these was originally 6. Later, 4 other virtues were added to the list, but these latter only play a secondary part. In this list, each virtue is treated in the same way as the wisdom, knowledge. That is to say, that its name is followed by the words, to go beyond. So while in the works of those authors who take the translation of paramita as excellent, we find excellent charity, excellent morality, etc., Tibetans tell us to, quote, go beyond charity, to go beyond wisdom, knowledge. The list of the virtues are then given. The gift, morality, patience, energy and effort, meditation, concentration of mind, transcendent wisdom, with the additional 4 virtues added later of method, skillfulness of means, aspirations, good wishes, strength, vigor, and knowledge, learning. It is a good thing to possess these virtues and to practice them. Is it a good thing? Question. Obviously, yes. But none of them taken by itself, nor all of them together, are able to produce liberation. The righteous man, the saint, as much as the wicked man and the criminal, remain prisoners in the round samsara of birth and death, of assemblages and dissolutions, which makes up the illusionary world of phenomena. Although in the round, the fate of the first named may differ from that of the second. According to the popular religious beliefs, the practice of these virtues leads to a happy rebirths in the world of men or in the world of the gods, while evil acts lead to unhappy rebirths in those spheres where suffering is reigning. The masses of Tibetans hardly look beyond these 2 kinds of future. Nevertheless, the idea that salvation, deliverance from samsara, the state of illumination of a Buddha, are very different things from the practice of virtue and the carrying out of religious rites, is not wholly foreign to them. That is a question the good people of the land of the snows think quite beyond their intelligence, and they do not stop to examine it. At a higher degree, that of the teaching called esoteric, it is explained that to be excellent, the virtues and their practice must have become integrated in our character. They must be unconscious, have developed into reflex actions. Thus, the act of helping a suffering being ought to occur as spontaneously, as instinctively as the act of pulling back one hand quickly if it touches anything red hot. If our charity, our patience, our effort, in fact, no matter which of the excellent virtues, only manifest itself after a mental process has shown us the usefulness of it, or the necessity of forcing ourselves to it through obedience to certain moral principles which we have been taught to respect, then the actions which we accomplish may be beneficial for those who are their object. We, however, shall only benefit from them as an educational exercise, which is likely to turn us into robots, moved by agencies exterior to ourselves. The deeper part of our being would not have been modified, and such transformation is the only thing that counts. Buddhist salvation, liberation, consists in a fundamental change in our perceptions, in our ideas, in our feelings. It is an awakening resulting from the transcendent and profound insight which causes us to, quote, see more, and to discover beyond the world of virtues and vices, of good and evil, a sphere where these pairs of opposites do not exist. It is a question, after having practiced the, quote, excellent virtues, of going beyond them, because the transcendent insight has shown them to be senseless, unfounded, ineffective. The doctrine of, quote, going beyond, in conjunction with those of the, quote, direct path and of, quote, sudden liberation, form the veritable core of the teachings of the higher degree, which are called secret teachings. And those who have been initiated into them, or who have understood their exactitude, are advised not to spread them lightly, as they are dangerous for the mass of men whose intelligence is too limited to grasp their real meaning. Ought we to consider the collection of doctrines and theories which together make up the secret teachings as being essentially and uniquely Tibetan? That would be somewhat risky. Ideas hardly ever spring up from a single center. In particular periods, we see similar ideas arise among men separated by great distances, and without there having been any material contact between them. However, as far as Tibet is concerned, we cannot neglect the possibility of direct or indirect relations between the Tibetan thinkers and living philosophers, or those who had lived on their frontiers, Chinese or India. The famous Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna has eloquently proclaimed the middle way, the Madhyamika, which leans neither towards affirmation nor towards negation, because these only exist relatively to each other, and so in consequence neither one nor the other has any independent reality of its own. One has to go beyond the idea of yes and no, of being as that of non-being, says Nagarjuna. Wisdom must go beyond all conceptions, or as it is translated by the Tibetans, we must go beyond wisdom. In other words, wisdom as we conceive it, which comes in the end to the same thing. Long before Nagarjuna, the Buddha had already laid down the principles of a similar spiritual and intellectual discipline. Speaking to one of his disciples, he said to this effect, quote, men are accustomed to state, quote, is or, quote, is not. But for him who perceives wisely, and according to the truth how all things are brought about in the world, for such an one there is no, quote, is not. And for him who perceives wisely and in truth how the things in the world perish, for him there is no, quote, is. Quote, everything is, is one of the extremes, nothing is the other. I teach between the two the truth of interdependent originations. That is to say that everything which exists depends on its existence, on the existence of other things which produce it or which support it, and that the existence of that which exists ceases when the causes of the conditions which support it themselves cease. Thus, all existence is relative. One cannot say that it is, because it is not autogeneous, nor, on the other hand, can one consider it as pure nothingness. Quote, to go beyond is, in fact, to cease to cling to the opinions, the connections which belong to the world of illusion, and to understand that they have only a relative value depending on things which themselves have only a relative existence, but which we should be wrong to consider as absolutely non-existent. The masters who in Tibet claim to be the possessors of the secret teachings, and who are recognized as such, never pretend that the doctrines they set forth to small groups of selected disciples have been wholly worked out in Tibet itself. On the contrary, they state that these doctrines and the disciplines attached thereto date back to the distant past, well before the oldest period mentioned in Tibetan history. If they sometimes attribute the origin of the transmission of the secret teachings to mythical personages such as Dorji Chang, they admit without difficulty that it is a picturesque way of expressing the fact that the beginnings of these teachings are unattainable by our researches, and that the spirit of these teachings has always, either in one world or in another, inspired an elite of thinkers who were particularly spick and who, quote, saw beyond that which appeared to the majority of beings. As far as we are concerned, leaving aside all groundless assumptions, we must recognize that the inner history of the religious and philosophical evolution of the Tibetans is not well known to us. In fact, we may say that it is unknown. The documents which we possess are of a relatively recent date, and hardly tell us anything beside the founding and propagation of Buddhism in the country by missionaries belonging to different Mayanist or Tantric schools. Yet other influences may have been at work in Tibet, either before the coming of Buddhism or at the period during which took place the building up of this composite body of philosophic and mystical theories and of popular religion which people of the West call Lamism. The bonds overcome by the Lamist clergy, and who now copy the latter in many ways as far as the white bonds are concerned, or who are only, with rare exceptions, simple sorcerers as far as the black bonds are in question, have probably included in the past some enlightened adepts of Taoist teachings. We still occasionally meet in Tibet some examples of these thinkers among the anchorites, although these would not claim to be Taoists. Examining the theories belonging to the secret teachings, the question arises whether certain among them, such as that of non-action, coupled in these teachings with the doctrines of, quote, going beyond, of the direct path, and of sudden illumination, have not entered as a result of contact with Chinese Taoists. This is evidently only a guess, and we ought not to concentrate our attention only on these latter. Tibetan masters of mysticism often mention teachings of northern origin, which have been mysteriously transmitted. These enigmatic sayings seem to be based rather on legend than on historical fact. Moreover, we ought not to take the word northern in the geographical sense. In Tibet, as in India, north has mystical meaning. On the other hand, some Indians, including the learned Mr. Tilak, believe in the Nordic origin of the Aryas, whose cradle was, according to them, situated in the Arctic regions. This would explain by the persistent effect of atavistic memories the fascination which is exercised by the North on some of their mystics. This explanation cannot apply to Tibet, where the same fascination is also found even to a higher degree. In the Tibetan legends, numerous allusions are made to a northern country where the transcendental doctrines originated. Certain Jorbas pretend to go there occasionally. Enlightened Tibetans believe that this is a matter of psychic experiences occurring in the course of special meditations and not of actual voyages. On the historical or semi-historical level, the tantric doctrines are, in the opinion of certain learned men, considered to have been imported into Bengal by traveling merchants coming from the north. In such a case, what north can be in question? From Tibet or from Kashmir, lying to the north of India, or from regions farther away and stretching beyond Tibet. We lack valid and precise information on this point. Moreover, it belongs to the domain of historical research, and as such is outside the scope of the present book, so I cannot discuss it at greater length. Let us return then to the doctrines propounded to students admitted to the initiation in the secret teaching. Is the doctrine of, quote, going beyond, which has been roughly sketched above, definitive? The masters of the secret teachings say that it leads a long way, but if you ask them categorically, does it lead to the goal, they will only smile and remain silent. The word goal, as also the idea of a goal, in other words, a final absolute objective, is not used in the secret teachings. Both are abandoned in going beyond the limit of the inner teachings. The master of the secret teachings will willingly remind their pupils of the ancient Buddhist parable of the raft. The traveler who finds his road blocked by a river will use a raft to reach the opposite shore. But this shore once reached, he will not carry the raft on his shoulders while continuing his journey. He will abandon it as something which has become useless. This raft represents the different kinds of methods, intellectual training or moral discipline, which are available as means to bring the seeker of liberation to the, quote, other shore. On this shore, both have lost their value. They bear no relation to the conditions existing on the other shore, and like the raft in the parable, they are only a useless burden. In any case, this, quote, other shore is itself only a figurative expression. It is nowhere, and it is everywhere. The other shore is that which is beyond all our conceptions, and this is why it is equivalent to the going beyond everything of the highest kind, transcendent wisdom, because it is also a conception of our mind and nothing more than a raft facilitating the crossing. The best, the surest of rafts, but which the transcendent insight shows at what it is in reality, that is to say, an instrument. Moreover, does the reaching of the other bank mean the attainment of a definite goal? This is what the majority of Buddhists believe. However, the point of view in the secret teachings is different. The man who has crossed the river will perhaps rest a while on the shore which he has reached, but beyond that point extends a country to be traversed. So the man will arise and continue that journey. The crossing of the river, the landing on the opposite bank are but a stage. Stage towards what destination? Taoist mystics have left us an enigmatic declaration to which the masters of the secret teaching fully subscribe when, in a slightly different form, they pose the problem to their pupils. That country which is nowhere is the real home. On the other hand, is there any traveler who makes a crossing? Is there a somebody who reaches the other shore? If this was the case, this traveler would carry with him the hither shore into the beyond, just as the dust on the soles of one's shoes is carried from one place to another. The traveler would transform the other bank into this bank, because here and there are in him, and that outside the mind, which thinks here and there, are no other here and there. To go beyond virtue and vice, opinions and beliefs, is to go beyond the mental constructions which are built up by the mind unceasingly, and to recognize by transcendent insight that they are void of reality. It is also to recognize by transcendent insight that which has been imagined as practicing virtue, surrendering to vice, as holding opinions and elaborating theories, as traveling towards a goal and reaching a goal, is nothing but an inconsistent phantom, devoid of reality.